All right, let's dive into this one. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. We've got a lot to unpack here. A moment that changed the course of history, wouldn't you say?
Definitely a turning point. One of those events, seemingly isolated, that sends shockwaves through, well, everything. Sarajevo, 1914. Personal desires, political tensions, even a bit of bad luck. It all collided.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we forget that these historical figures, they weren't just names in a textbook. They had lives, ambitions, loves. Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, their story's pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. Their marriage was a bit of a scandal at the time. Emperor Franz Joseph, he only allowed it on one condition, that Sophie would never be considered his equal in rank morganatic marriage, they called it. So she couldn't share his titles or, even sit beside him at official events.
Wow. Imagine being in love but constantly facing that public reminder of your wife's lower status. Must have been tough.
You can imagine the resentment. And Franz Ferdinand, well, he wasn't one to just accept things as they were. He adored Sophie and wanted her to be acknowledged properly.
That's where the military inspection in Sarajevo comes in, right? The loophole.
Exactly. If he was acting in a military capacity, then Sophie could be publicly recognized by his side. But of course, it was a risk. Tensions between Austria-Hungary and Serbia were already running high.
And Serbia, at the time, they were experiencing this surge of nationalism, right? Driven by those recent military victories, they were looking to expand their territory.
It was a powder keg. And even something like the Pig War, this seemingly minor trade dispute between the two empires, it really shows you how deep that animosity ran.
Yeah, I was reading about that. Wild how these seemingly small economic conflicts can symbolize something much bigger.
Oh, absolutely. Austria-Hungary felt threatened by Serbia's ambitions. And within Serbia, there were groups, some more radical than others, ready to take action. Like, you know about the Black Hand, right? Secret society, pretty chilling agenda, Greater Serbia, achieved by any means necessary.
Yeah, any means necessary.
Yeah.
That's where it gets interesting. We're not talking about one big group here. There were others too, each with their own motivations. Young Bosnia, for example.
Ah, yes. Those passionate young men fighting for a Bosnia free from Austria-Hungary. And then there's the Narodna Odbrana, more of a paramilitary organization, pushing for Serbian unification.
So you've got this whole web of players, all tied to this idea of Serbian nationalism, but operating in different ways, some with connections to the Serbian government and military, getting support, training. It's all very murky.
The level of official involvement is still debated. Were they truly rogue actors, or were they pawns in a bigger game? We may never know for sure.
It's like a spy thriller. Plots, secret meetings. And from what I'm seeing here, there wasn't just one attempt on Franz Ferdinand's life. There were multiple plots converging.
There was a Bosnian carpenter, Mehmed Basic. He was initially tasked with killing the governor of Bosnia, Oskar Potiuric, part of a separate plot, but shows the level of unrest, the willingness to resort to violence.
And then you have Gavrilo Princip and his group. They saw Franz Ferdinand's visit as their opportunity. The Archduke, a symbol of Austro-Hungarian oppression, his assassination, a strike for their cause.
It's chilling, really. These young men, barely out of their teens, driven by this potent mix of idealism and anger, willing to do the unthinkable.
But how do they even manage to pull this off? Smuggled weapons, secret routes.
There was a whole network involved, right?
A tunnel network, they called it. A series of safe houses, contacts, helping them slip in and out of Austria-Hungary. It shows how organized they were, how much support they had.
So let's recap. We got the stage set. A volatile political climate, a defiant Archduke, and a group of determined assassins. June 28th. What unfolds is a day of missed chances, fateful turns, leading to that pivotal moment.
A day that starts with Franz Ferdinand and Sophie arriving in Sarajevo, greeted by cheering crowds. No idea that danger lurks just around the corner. And some of the early attempts were almost comical, if it weren't so serious. A bomb bounces off the car, another assassin loses his nerve, one tries to swallow a cyanide pill and jump into a river. It's like a comedy of errors, but with deadly consequences.
And you have to wonder about the security. Given the tension, you'd expect more vigilance, but...
Yeah, it seems like Franz Ferdinand himself added to the drama, interrupted the mayor's speech at the town hall, visibly shaken.
I came here on a visit, and I am greeted with bombs.
Defiance, but also you can hear the vulnerability. He knew he was a target.
And Sophie, always the calm one, urging him to continue. They decide to visit those injured in the bombing. A gesture of compassion that would seal their fate.
A tragic irony. That kind gesture, plus a few wrong turns, miscommunications, it led their car straight into the path of Gavrilo Princip, who had been waiting for his chance. Suddenly, he's face to face with the Archduke. Their car stalls right in front of him. Fate.
Chilling. All those missed chances, all that planning, and it comes down to this. A chance encounter on a crowded street.
Princip steps forward, takes aim. 2 shots. One hits Franz Ferdinand in the neck, the other Sophie in the abdomen. 2 shots that echo through history.
And in those final moments, amidst the chaos, Franz Ferdinand's words to Sophie, "Don't die. Live for our children." A deeply personal tragedy unfolding within this grand historical narrative.
It's hard to even imagine. It's almost impossible to grasp, the sheer magnitude of what those 2 shots set in motion. This one event, this assassination, it ignites a world war. It's incredible.
And it shows how these individual actions, passions, ideals, they intersect with these larger historical forces in ways you can't predict. And the timing, the context, it all played a role. Like you mentioned, it wasn't just any random day. June 28th, Vidovdan.
Oh, right, Vidovdan. A date loaded with symbolism, especially for Serbian nationalists, a heavy day.
Exactly. St. Vitus's Day, the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo, 1389, this pivotal moment in Serbian history. They fought against the Ottomans, a story of heroic defiance, but ultimately they were defeated.
So for the assassins, especially those with that greater Serbia vision, that date meant everything. Stepping into the shoes of legends almost. Seeking to avenge this centuries-old loss.
That sense of historical destiny, it fueled them. Absolutely. They saw themselves as liberators, fighting for freedom for all Serbs, but the reality, as we know, turned out much differently.
And immediately after the assassination, it was just chaos, wasn't it? These anti-Serb riots erupting across the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Fear and anger boiling over.
Imagine it. Mobs in the streets, rumors spreading like wildfire. It shows how quickly things can escalate, how easily fear is manipulated.
And Austria-Hungary, they saw it as a direct attack by Serbia, right? Convinced there had to be some level of official involvement.
And that's where the July crisis comes in. This incredibly tense period of diplomacy, brinkmanship, every move bringing them closer to war. Austria-Hungary issues an ultimatum to Serbia, a list of demands designed to be rejected.
What were they demanding exactly? Just to, lay it all out.
A full investigation, of course. But they also wanted Serbia to suppress any anti-Austrian propaganda, and, get this, they demanded the right to participate in that investigation on Serbian soil. It was meant to be humiliating, a power play.
So Serbia's caught in this impossible situation, trying to appease Austria-Hungary while also seeking support from their ally, Russia. And the rest of Europe is just watching, holding their breath.
And that's where those alliances we talked about earlier, they kick in. Germany, bound by treaty to Austria-Hungary, pledges their support. Russia, determined to protect Serbia, starts mobilizing its troops. The stakes just keep getting higher.
Like a giant chess game, each move risking total disaster. Was there any attempt at diplomacy? Any chance of stopping the war at this point?
There were efforts, letters exchanged, negotiations attempted, but ultimately it was too late. Miscommunications, suspicion, and this sense that war was inevitable, it all contributed to the failure of diplomacy. Some historians argue that war was practically unavoidable at this point, too many tensions simmering for too long.
So the assassination was the match, but the powder keg was already there, just waiting. And once that fuse was lit, the day no stopping the explosion.
And on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, dominoes start falling, Germany declares war on Russia and France, Britain declares war on Germany. This localized act of violence explodes into a global conflict.
Stalin's dead, empires crumble, the world forever changed, all because of those 2 shots in Sarajevo.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected everything is. How even events that seem isolated can have these massive unintended consequences.
And we have to ask, what are the lessons here? This wasn't just about one assassination. The dangers of unchecked nationalism, the fragility of peace, the absolute importance of diplomacy, those lessons, they resonate even now, We've talked about the fallout, the war, all of that. But what about the assassins themselves? What happened to them, after Sarajevo?
Their trials were pretty swift. A mix of, I guess you could say, political theater and a genuine effort to figure out, well, the truth. They were all caught, some right there at the scene, others after trying to run.
Gavrilo Princip, the one who actually shot the Archduke. He was too young for the death penalty, wasn't he? Under Austro-Hungarian law.
Right. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. But he didn't serve the whole sentence. Died in prison in 1918, tuberculosis.
Wow. So just 4 years after the assassination, it's almost like he wanted to reshape history through this act of violence, but then he dies this slow, painful death, locked away from the world he wanted to change. It's a strange twist.
And his legacy, it's still complicated. In some parts of the former Yugoslavia, they see him as this folk hero, a symbol of Serbian nationalism, resistance against Austria-Hungary.
But for others, he's a villain, a terrorist who caused unimaginable suffering. It really goes to show you how history is written, how perspectives change depending on who's telling the story.
One thing I find really interesting, there are accounts that Princip himself later on expressed regret for what happened, almost like he didn't fully grasp, just how catastrophic the consequences would be.
It's like he unleashed something he couldn't control. That chain reaction, it went way beyond anything he could have imagined. Speaks to the whole idea of unintended consequences. Actions have ripples.
The trials also revealed a lot about Serbia itself. The Black Hand, that shadowy organization, they faced accusations of being involved, led to purges, accusations of treason.
Wow, so it wasn't just Austria-Hungary seeking answers. There were internal struggles within Serbia too.
Yeah.
Everyone trying to figure out, okay, who was really behind all of this?
It just goes to show, these events, they're rarely simple. Motives get tangled, people think they're acting for a good cause, but then you get caught up in these power struggles, hidden agendas.
This whole deep dive, it's been pretty eye-opening. Love, spies, assassins, and ultimately, the very things that led to a world war. What stands out to you from all this?
I think what strikes me is how human it all is. History, I mean. It's not just these dates and names in a textbook. It's about choices, passions colliding with politics, and then the consequences, often totally unexpected.
Yeah, and it shows how connected everything is, how much impact one event, one decision can have.
Exactly. The past isn't just something that's over and done with. It shapes our world. Understanding its complexities helps us deal with the present, even the future.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. But keep those questions coming. What other historical events, those turning points where small actions led to huge unintended consequences, what can we learn from them? Keep questioning, keep exploring. That's what it's all about.